What is carbon offsetting? Instead of reducing their gas emissions, industrialized countries claim that some actions, such as planting trees or preventing trees from being cut, can compensate for their emissions. Trees indeed absorb carbon as they grow, which they transform together with water and sunshine into sugars that feed them. However, when trees die and decompose, the carbon is released into the atmosphere. Obviously, planting trees does not really compensate for carbon emissions from burning coal or oil that stay in the atmosphere far longer than the life of a tree. But pretending that it does is a convenient tale for industrialized countries to be able to continue with their excessive destructive way of life while reassuring their population. Imagine a stranger cutting 3 trees that are sacred for your community and claiming that this is fine because he paid someone to plant 3 saplings nearby. He claims that your loss has been compensated as the total number of trees in the future will be identical. This is obviously not equivalent, as your sacred trees were unique, and as you lost your trees today while the new ones will not be grown for many years. The same goes for carbon credits. Here is how it is supposed to work. Project developers will look for land where to plant trees, or land where forests are abundant and allegedly at risk of being cut. They will negotiate an agreement with the owners of the land, where they pay them in exchange for selling them the right to plant trees, or in exchange for not cutting the trees on this piece of land. Often the deal also requires the owner of the land to no longer go onto the land for which the rights have been sold. Once they have obtained the land rights and planted the trees, if that is the project, or done nothing, if the project is simply not to cut, they will start issuing so-called carbon credits. Now think of a carbon credit as a piece of paper representing a promise whether to plant trees or a promise not to cut existing trees. These credits can be bought and sold. The project developers will sell the carbon credits to buyers, most often located in different countries. The buyers will use these credits to continue emitting unsustainable quantities of gases while pretending that this is compensated and therefore acceptable. Thus, while both project developers and buyers will claim that their goal is to protect forests, this is actually not true, as the projects and related credits are used to enable new emissions to take place elsewhere. Because industrialized countries emit very large quantities of these gases, they need very large quantities of land to plant trees and sequester carbon. In fact, the land required for carbon offsetting at the current rate of burning oil, gas, and coal is bigger than entire countries. As project developers continuously search for the cheapest land, and ideally land where nature has not been destroyed, they are very, very attracted to the land of indigenous communities. This is because indigenous land rights are not always recognized or enforced. And even when they are, project developers hope to be able to negotiate a cheaper price for indigenous land rights than for land in their own country. Carbon offset projects have been in existence for 15 years. So what have they achieved so far? Many studies have found that most carbon offset credits did not lead to extra protection of the forests, as the forests which were claimed to be protected by the carbon offset project were not under threat in the first place. In other cases, the trees were burned down, or the trees being planted were a single non-native species that did not survive long and therefore failed to sequester carbon. A recent study assessed that 94% of the carbon credits certified by the world's largest certification company, Verra, had no benefits to the climate, in particular as the threats to forests had been grossly overstated. Far from protecting forests and the planet, the vast majority of these projects have thus led to an increase in carbon emissions when taking into account the emissions that they enabled elsewhere. Regarding their impact on the local communities, it has been reported that in many carbon offset projects, The communities owning and stewarding the land were neither informed of the project, nor did they give their agreement, yet the project proceeded regardless. There have been many reports as well of communities not being aware of the sharing of benefits from the sale of credits, and of project developers not respecting the agreement that they signed and failing to compensate the communities as agreed. Many projects have also seen human rights violations, including beatings, torture, rape, and murder. For example, it was reported that a forestry plantation project managed by a company called Green Resources in the Kachong Central Forest Reserve in Uganda led to access to the plantation being denied to the nearby communities, even though this land was vital for growing food, raising livestock, and collecting forest resources. When community members tried to go onto the land, they were beaten up by the guards. The chemical products used to grow the trees polluted the land and waterways, leading to the death of animals and loss of crops. Such human rights abuses are made possible by very limited independent oversight, and in some cases by national laws that do not protect indigenous people. Many protected areas, including national parks, from where indigenous people have been evicted or abused by park rangers, are now developing carbon offset projects to fund these park rangers. Such a situation is, for example, currently happening in Cambodia in the Keo Sema carbon project managed by the Wildlife Conservation Society. In another project in Peru, forest community members have been forcefully evicted and seen their homes being cut down with chainsaws and ropes by park guards and police in Alta Mayo National Park, an area that hosts a large carbon offsetting program whose credits are sold to compensate for the emissions of activities, including cruise ships and theme parks in other countries. In yet another case, project developer Carbon Next was accused of persuading Kayapo communities at the Alto Rio Guama Indigenous Territory in the state of Para to sign documents containing blank pages in order to obtain exclusive carbon credit rights. The document had not been translated into relevant languages that they understood, and they believed they were signing a meeting minutes sheet rather than a contract. The tribe was also not told that the money would come from the advance sale of carbon credits, nor to whom the credits would be sold. After numerous reports to the Federal Prosecutor's Office, however, Carbon Next abandoned the project, and if the violations are confirmed, may face legal charges to repair any damage caused to indigenous groups. Now, some carbon offset projects have also been found to create conflicts within communities when the members receive different levels of information, or when only some members were consulted or received compensation. As an example, the decision to participate in carbon markets is still a contentious one within the Yurok tribe in California, as not everyone understood that it would lock their forests as carbon pools for 100 years, and as some of its people are concerned about the fact that it gives corporate buyers a license to pollute the air elsewhere. Yet, despite the evidence of environmental failure and human rights abuses, more and more carbon projects are being launched, leading to ever-increasing pressure to find land for these projects. This is because industrialized countries will fight to the very end to keep the power and wealth that they derive from activities emitting these gases. The charade that these projects compensate for gas emissions is thus very important for them in order to continue prioritizing their power, wealth, and way of life, while reassuring their concerned populations.